Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. I am your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Jessica Crawford. Jessica, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in South Carolina, but grew up in Mississippi, small town Mississippi, and got interested in archaeology when I married a farmer. I was working on finishing my English degree at Ole Miss and married a farmer and actually found a point, if I called it an arrowhead at the time, a big point on our farm one day and kind of got hooked from there. I became interested. I wanted to know who made it, how old was it, the same things anybody wants to know when they find something like that. So I did some research at my local library, and this was in late 1990s. So there wasn't much there. This was like right before the internet was really a thing. And so at my local library, there was just like a price guide there. So it didn't tell me much. So I looked for as much information as I could find and became interested in or joined the Mississippi Archaeological Association and did some volunteer work with them. I think every state has a state society. And I volunteered with the Mississippi Archaeological Association for a few years and was helping with the project that Ole Miss was doing when Jay Johnson, who at the time was the director for the Center for Archaeological Research at Ole Miss, said to me one day, and at this time I was about 26, 27, and he said to me one day, why don't you just enroll in my master's program? I'd finally got my English degree, and I thought, gosh, I'm too old. Just go back to school and learn how to do things. At the time, I was used to standing in line to register. You registered online by then, and I thought, gosh, I'm just too old, and all his students seemed so young. I just didn't think I could do it until one of them came up and asked him a question, kind of a basic question for Southeastern cultural chronology. He said, a silly question actually, which is older, Middle or Woodland or Marksville? And Marksville is a culture within the Middle Woodland period. And I thought, gosh, if a grad student is asking that question, I can do this. And so I went back and got my master's degree in anthropology at Ole Miss. And when I was finishing up with that degree, I became involved with the Archaeological Conservancy. They were trying to buy sites in Mississippi, and we're actually trying to buy a site that a friend of mine owned. And I told John Conaway, who worked with the Department of Archives and History one day, that my friend's husband had just bought this farm that had some mounds on it. And he said, well, that's a site that the Archaeological Conservancy has wanted to buy for a while. And so I contacted the Conservancy and I talked to my friend, and he said, sure, I'd be happy to sell the mounds to the Conservancy. And so I met the then Southeastern Regional Director for the Conservancy through that. And he said, look, I need somebody to work in Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. At the time, the regional office, Southeast Regional Office, was in Ackworth, Georgia. So I started with the Conservancy like that. And a few years later, he retired and I was made Southeast Regional Director. And I guess it's about 2003, something like that. So I've been with the Conservancy for a while. It's gone by fast, but that's how I ended up where I am.
Well, you sound like you enjoy serving with the Conservancy. In case it isn't obvious, that's what we're talking about today is the Archaeological Conservancy here in the United States.
Yeah, and if you want, I can kind of give you the short version of what the Conservancy is and what we do.
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, I often tell people that we're set up like the Nature Conservancy because we actually were. Our founders approached the Nature Conservancy and said, would you like to start preserving archaeological sites in addition to natural areas? And they said no. And so the founders of the Archaeological Conservancy said, okay, we'll do something that's similar. It's just we preserve archaeological sites. And this was in the Southwest. It was in, at the time, the main office was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico now. So this was started by, historians, archaeologists, avocational archaeologists, people who were really concerned about site destruction in the Southwest. And so we were founded to identify and preserve the nation's most important, most significant archaeological sites for education and research purposes. So what we do is go around acquiring title through purchase or landowner donation, or what we call a bargain sale to charity, where a landowner donates part and sells part of the site to us, and they still get a tax write-off. But so we acquire these sites and hold them in perpetuity for research and educational purposes. They're usually not open to the public unless we can get someone. We have to have local docents or local site stewards, because there's a liability issue for us. But and also there are times when we will work with the state parks or the National Park Service to acquire land that will eventually be incorporated into an existing park. But in most cases, we are set up to hold and manage title to these archaeological sites, forever. Whether or not they're being researched, it just depends. But there are lots of sites in my region, and we do have five regional offices also. I'm Southeast Regional, and we manage the sites in our regions and acquire additional sites. That's what the regional directors do. We have a Southwest Regional Office, which is our main office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have Western Regional Office, which is in Reno, Nevada. We have our Midwestern Regional Office, which is right out from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we have our Eastern Regional Office, which is in Frederick, Maryland. And of course, my regional office is in Marks, Mississippi now, which is obviously where I grew up. So from my office, I work in 8 southeastern states.
So you must do a lot of traveling in relation to your position, I assume.
I do a lot of traveling. Most offices have 2 regional staff. I'm regional director, and then Nikki Matson works with me as field representative. Right now, our Eastern Regional Office and Midwestern Regional Offices don't have field reps, but they are in the midst of hiring field reps. And yes, Nikki and I both travel throughout the Southeast just to visit the sites that we already own, to deal with maintenance issues, to deal with people who have asked to do research on our sites. But we also travel to look at new sites, potential acquisitions. That's what most of my travel involves, is meeting with landowners or archaeologists to look at sites and evaluate them for potential acquisition.
So what makes a site worth acquiring? Like, I assume there has to be a certain amount of evidence to claim it as an archaeological site.
Yeah, we do. The Conservancy has our own site criteria that we use to evaluate sites. And it's really, we prefer sites that are on the National Register or have already been declared National Register eligible. They have to be something that we can afford. Or, if we have to buy them, we have to be able to afford them. They also have to be something that we can manage after we acquire them. Sometimes we're offered sites that, say, may have some kind of chemical waste, or might end up being a Superfund cleanup site. Or sometimes, we'll be offered something that's eroding away rapidly. And in some cases, we can address erosion, but anybody that's worked on archaeological sites knows that in a lot of cases, when you're dealing with of course, sea level rise and things like that, there's no way to stop or preserve what's being washed away. You just have to sort of mitigate it or let nature take its course. So it's got to be something that, if we say we're going to acquire an archaeological site, we have to be able to, we do that and we say we can protect them and preserve them. So it has to be something that we actually can protect or preserve. It has to be something that we can access, that we can get access to. But mainly, as long as there's research potential, that's the key thing. And if it's an archaeological site, if we're calling it an archaeological site, there's almost always research potential. We just have to weigh, the cost and benefits. I've learned the hard way that a lot of times sites that I had written off that I thought were probably, there was nothing, people had said there's nothing left there, it's all eroded away, or it's been looted to death. It's almost in every case when I've dealt with a site like that, it turns out that was not the case. A good example is Stallings Island, which is located in the Savannah River right out from Augusta. It's famous as being the site where some of the earliest pottery in the Southeast was found. And the landowner donated it to us, but it had been heavily looted. It looked like a moonscape. it was difficult to protect because it was on an island in the middle of the river. There were no boat ramps nearby to even get to it to check on it. It couldn't get equipment over there to keep the growth down because the tall growth hid looters. And it was donated to us. And before we had some archaeologists come out there and look at it, we just sort of took a risk and said, okay, we'll take it. But it turned out Ken Sassman from Florida went out there and did some testing, and he found a lot of intact deposits. He did these units, sort of did a cross section of these looter holes and went below the looter holes and found a lot of intact features. And that's a place that a lot of people had just written off like as, well, we just got a useless island because it had all been dug to death, but it turns out it hadn't. So, and we know that with remote sensing now too. A lot of times we think a mound has been leveled, you can do some geophysics out there and see that, the bottom half meter of a mound is still there under alluvium, and it just looks flat. So we'd have to look really closely, but there's almost always research potential there.
Yeah, that's the thing about, archaeological sites is even if, it's left unattended or people visit it at a regular basis, there's still more to find out there just because of either evolving technology, the weather could wash away a little bit of it, but you never actually run out of things until somebody says, hey, there are no more things here.
That's sort of our philosophy, where especially we do have a research policy that archaeologists, if they want to do research on one of our sites, I send them our research policy, and there's certain guidelines that they have to follow. And part of that is they have to send a detailed research design. They have to tell me what questions they're addressing. You can't just go out there and dig for the heck of it. And of course, no one is allowed to completely excavate a site. And we really love it. A lot of archaeologists now are doing this. They'll go back and they'll redig somebody's old unit to get, soil samples from the side of the unit or something like that, which is a wonderful thing to do. But we promote what we call conservation archaeology. And as new techniques evolve, the more we can learn from these sites. I was in graduate school with Jay Johnson, and he was testing, thermal infrared cameras. He had some of the first GPRs and conductivity meters. And we were testing equipment that is normal now with geophysics. And when I was first volunteering, we would put a unit in and have no idea, just kind of blindly put it in here, no idea if it would come down on a wall trench, a Mississippian wall trench or not. But now, we can look beforehand, and, that can kind of guide us. So it's just, and dating techniques, as techniques improve and evolve and get better and better, it's more important to conserve these sites.
And honestly, the evolving technology, I don't want to say it makes it easier, but it does make it easier to conserve the site as a whole. Like what we're doing is less invasive with, things like drone technology, ground penetrating radar. So we don't have to disrupt an entire field anymore. We can just, narrow it down to a little section or two.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. You do still, a lot of this stuff is still sort of in that you still have to ground truth. I think you'll always have to ground truth because, I've seen a lot of geophysics results where we think we don't know what this is. There's something here, but we're not sure what it is. But a lot of it's getting better and better, and you can almost, especially with burned Mississippian houses, you can just pick those out fast. And we've got researchers about to start work on one of our sites in Mississippi, and we're having erosion problems there. And they're going to do some coring there, and we're going to look at the stratigraphy, see what we're losing, look at the rate of loss. We can use drone footage for that, and geophysics as well. So we'll be able to non-invasively see how much this site is eroding and what we're losing as it erodes, which is really, really cool.
So you're working on that site. What are some sites that the Conservancy already controls here in the Southeast that people might know of or have probably heard of?
Well, Stallings Island is one of the best known. That was one that was in my textbooks in graduate school. It's famous for the early ceramics there. One that we have in Florida that most people, it always rings a bell with people, is the Wendover site. It's known for the bog burials, middle archaic, mostly middle archaic, but very old. What they call them bog people. I know that's an actual archaeological term, but it sounds kind of weird to me. But to call them bog people, but it is a large wet site. It's in a big swampy area, and actually in a neighborhood right outside of Titusville, Florida. So that's a famous one. We own parts of Fort Tom Beckby, which the University of West Alabama. We own it jointly with the University of West Alabama. They've been doing a lot of work there.
I did my field school there, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a cool site. And that's one of those sites where Ashley Dumas called me. I think she was in Charleston. She was somewhere at a meeting, and she found out that part of it was going to be auctioned. It was one of those delinquent taxes auctions. It was going to be auctioned on the back steps of the courthouse. And she called me. She found out about it, and she said, can you be here like in a few days in Alabama to help us buy this part of the Fort Tom Beckby site? And I didn't know, I hadn't heard anything about Fort Tom Beckby. And she sent me some information, and we were able to come up with, I think, about $50,000. And then the University of West Alabama contributed. And Ashley and I went to the courthouse steps like within just a few days. And we were out there, and we won the auction. It was the first time I've ever done that. I've always heard of those courthouse auctions, and our Midwest regional director does that a lot, trying to buy the outer parts of the Cahokia site there in East St. Louis. Anytime there's a little lot there that goes up for back taxes, because again, a house, this is an old neighborhood, houses have been there, but what's under the ground is there's still a lot of archaeology left there. We're buying parts of what was called the Troyville site in Jonesville, Louisiana. The town of Jonesville is on top of it. That's the type site for the Troyville phase. And the town, they used the Great Mound there as fill for a bridge, a big bridge there. I mean, the town looks flat. You have to look really closely to see the change in the topography, but every yard has part of a mound in it. And that's something that Joe Saunders and Risa Jones did a lot of work on back in the, I guess, late 1990s. And they basically gave me a map of the town and said, you need this house lot, you need this lot, this lot, this lot. So that's another one that's really well known. I'm trying to think of Carson Mounds in Mississippi. We have Prospect Hill Plantation in Mississippi. We have Foxwood Farms in South Carolina, which is a really cool site near, it's called a little community called Pumpkin Town. I believe, and Tommy Charles did a lot of work there several seasons. So South Carolina people know that one real well. We've got parts, we've got land adjacent to Okmulgee, and we're in the process of turning that over to the National Park Service now. So we've got all kinds of cool sites. And I'm here in South Carolina now looking at I'm talking about some Revolutionary War sites, which is a kind of a change from what I usually do, which is mound sites.
Yeah, I think when people think of archaeology, especially here in the Southeast, like they have a very distinct period of when they think archaeology isn't not necessarily relevant, but when it just stops, like something worth finding just stops. Like we've had, numerous wars and conflicts here past, like the end of the Mississippian period and on. Like there's more to the Southeast than the Civil War.
Oh, so much more. I think my connection might be kind of slow. Yeah, and we're actually diversifying. Where every couple of years, the Conservancy, we do sort of a reevaluation of our holdings in certain areas. We look at what we have. We have a lot of Mississippian mounds here and woodland mounds. Do we have paleo sites? Like I'll look at all the sites we have, and we do have one paleo site near Jonesboro, Arkansas. It's the Sloan site, which is Big Dalton site, a Dalton Cemetery site, which is a pretty well-known site. There's a book about it. But that's the only paleo site I have. So, we'll try to reassess what we have and try to, look for things that fill in gaps that we have in the chronology. But also, you can only get what somebody's willing to sell or donate. So that's a lot of times what kind of guides what we acquire, but we are diversifying more. I mean, I have the Prospect Hill plantation in Mississippi. I'm looking at some extinct town sites. Also, while I'm here in South Carolina, I'm looking at some settlement Indian sites, which are in these small bands of Indians that came here from other parts of the Southeast, like, for instance, the Natchez. After the Natchez Uprising in 1730, a small group of them came here to Charlestown to get protection from the English because the French, were after them. And so there's a little Natchez Indian settlement right outside of Charleston. And they've actually found some Tunica pottery in these areas, which is fascinating to me. And these areas are being gobbled up by Charleston as it develops. So I'm also going to be looking at some of those. We have what I think is really interesting. We even have a synagogue site in our eastern region. She just acquired an old creamery, which I'm not sure I don't know about the archaeology of this creamery site. We have a Pamplin pipe factory site. We do try to avoid standing structures. The plantation that I have, Prospect Hill, does have a house on it, and it's not, doesn't have electricity. It's really a shell of a house, and we are trying to separately raise money to stabilize it. But we're doing archaeology this summer. Mississippi State University is going to be doing archaeology on the enslaved areas behind the house, and that's going to be great public outreach. We're asking a lot of the public to come and volunteer, especially the local descendant communities. So, the sites in my region, while most of them are Indian mound sites, these French colonial sites like Tombeckbee, we have Fort St. Pierre, we have an easement, a protective easement on the site of Old Mobile down in Mobile, Alabama. So that's, it's not all mounds, all pre-contact. There's a lot of historic stuff. And I'm looking at some free African-American, like freedmen sites also.
And you brought up an interesting point with the expansion of cities like Charleston. That makes me think that what the Conservancy does is even more crucial now than it has been, because cities like that are expanding so rapidly. I mean, especially here in the Southeast, cities like New Orleans, Birmingham, Huntsville, where I live, they expand on almost a weekly basis.
Yeah, that's, the one reason I'm here around Charleston is I was talking to someone with the Edisto Natchez Coosa, and she said, that Charleston they are in the area where they've always been, and it's becoming gentrified. Charleston is expanding out there, and there are sites around them, pre-contact and contact, especially a lot of, 1700s English and settlement Indian sites. So, I got interested in that, and then I've talked to some CRM archaeologists who have been working on these sites, and they've been a lot of help lately, because they're the ones who are doing the phase 1s and phase 2s ahead of expansion in most cases. And so they're the ones that are familiar with these sites that are in danger. So it's, I always ask them to keep the Conservancy in mind when you're working for a developer who is building something and he runs into something that's going to be a little bit much. He can't mitigate it or doesn't want to mitigate it. It can be donated to the Conservancy for a tax deduction, and we'll just maintain it as a green space, and they get wonderful, publicity for doing this great thing. And, it's sort of a win-win for all of us. So that's how I get a lot of help from CRM archaeologists in that way.
So we're about out of time. Jessica, for anybody, I know you brought this up. If people wanted to volunteer with the Conservancy or reach out to you, how could they do that?
Well, we have a website, which is the archaeologicalconservancy.org. And it's a brand new website, actually. We have a quarterly magazine, and you can download back issues of the quarterly magazine. You can join the Conservancy. You can donate to projects, and my contact information is on there as well. And it's got links to our YouTube channels. We do virtual lectures and things like that. So you can find out all about the Archaeological Conservancy and how to contact me and what we're doing on sites and in all our regions from our website.
Do you have anything coming up? I know summer's getting ready to start, so I know people will have more free time than they would during the rest of the year. Is there anything coming up that people could help out with?
Well, if you are in Mississippi at the hottest time of the summer, the end of July, early August, Dr. Sean Lambert will be at Prospect Hill doing his field school there for about 4.5 weeks. And it is one where we are happy to have volunteers, and we'll have information on that on our website. And as well as we have a Facebook page that's updated regularly, but we're on Instagram and X and Threads and all of that. But we'll have some information about that project, and we do ask for volunteers there if anybody wants to come and hang out. They're staying in Natchez, and Prospect Hill is located about 40 minutes northeast of Natchez, right off Highway 61 at Lorman, Mississippi. So that's one way. And then you can contact me for volunteer efforts. We just had a cleanup day at Fort St. Pierre in Mississippi. When we need volunteers, we can always use site stewards. If somebody is, especially members of local state archaeological societies, those make good site stewards. These are people that we vet and can go out periodically, check on sites for us. But all of that is on our website.
Well, Jessica, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I've enjoyed talking to you and showing off how wonderful archaeology here is in the Southeast.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed your podcast and was kind of hoping for an invitation. So thank you.
Yay, everybody gets what they want.
Wonderful.
Well, take care, everybody. This has been a really fun episode, and stay tuned for more.